morning, everyone. It's so good to have everybody today. Thank you so much for coming. So we'll get started with a welcome from Amanda Waldrop. She is the Assistant Director of my division. So I'll just hand it over to Amanda.
Thank you for the introduction, Kathy. As she said, my name is Amanda Waldrop. Thank you all so much for driving in today. We really appreciate it. Hope everyone has had a great start to the school year. And thank you all so much for what you do for gifted and talented students. Look forward to meeting with you today.
If you would, go ahead and read the purpose.
All right, so the purpose is the State Advisory Council for Gifted and Talented Education is hereby created and attached to the Kentucky Department of Education. The council's purpose is to make recommendations regarding the provisions of services for gifted and talented students in Kentucky's education system.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So now I'll hand it over to Dr. Roberts. And Dr. Roberts, if you would call roll.
I shall call roll. Katie Booth.
Here.
Shaditra Bradford. Lindsay Burton.
Here.
Kimberly Code. Randy Corbett.
Here.
Pauline Covington.
Here.
Byron Darnell.
Here.
Nathan Dyer. Anna England.
Here.
Kirk Haynes. Philip Cash. Emily Lawson. Jean Lee.
Here.
Tiffany Marshall. Brenda Martin.
Here.
John Maxey.
Here.
Julie Roberts. Here. Kim Nettleton.
Here.
That is our number, and we have 11 present.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Okay. So I don't know if you've had a chance or not. This was in our Google folder, which I believe Joe shared with you guys, the Google folder link. But if not, there should be a copy in your folder. If you didn't get a folder, there are folders over on the credenza there. Let's just take a minute then to review the minutes. The minutes should be in your folder. Okay. So we'll put those up on the screen here real quickly. Figure out how to do that. And we might come back to that. We might table that and come back to that. So I'll table that and we'll come back to looking at the minutes. Okay. So moving on from there. Let's see here. So the next thing that's on our agenda is the nomination and voting for the council secretary, the chairperson, and co-chair. So Dr. Roberts is going to describe the officer roles that are vacant and ask for nominations and/or volunteers. The group will then vote on each role. We're going to start with the chair, and then we'll do the vice chair, and then the secretary. And so after each nomination, we'll ask for a motion and a second. There'll be some discussion. The members will vote, and Natasha is going to chart responses, and then I'll email the template that we're taking notes on to the secretary to complete taking notes for the day. That sound good? Right. So I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Roberts, to talk about the other roles for each of the
chair of the advisory council is what I'm doing now, running the meeting. It also has the opportunity to look at the agenda prior to the time that the group meets. And I would say the being chair is more challenging when it's done virtually, just because it's so hard to get the people responding in quite the same way as if you're looking at them as we have the opportunity to do today. The chair would have the opportunity to represent the advisory group if called upon to do so. And then the vice chair would do any of those things in the absence of the chair. And then the secretary would take the notes of the meeting.
So then next we'll have nominations for, start with chair. Okay, go ahead, Jean Lee.
Nominate Dr. Roberts.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Okay.
I just did my emotion.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. Is there any discussion? All right, well, I'll ask for a motion then. I need to make a motion to,
We're moving to vote.
well, I think I got things out of order a little bit there, Katie, so I'm supposed to ask for a motion and then a second. And then we do discussion and we vote. So do I have a motion to nominate Dr. Roberts for chairman?
I make a motion to nominate Dr. Roberts for chair.
Then is there any discussion? All right, then all the members will vote. And I believe anytime we vote, we have to do the roll, correct? So I will read the roll. Just give me just a second here. All right.
When you're not virtual.
It's anytime you meet, you have to do a vote, right? All right, so Katie Booth?
Yes.
Okay. Sean Deidre is not here. Lindsay Burton?
Yes.
Brandy Corbett?
Yes.
Pauline Covington?
Here.
Byron Darnell?
Yes.
Hannah England?
Yes.
Jean Lee?
Yes.
Brenda Martin?
Yes.
John Maxey?
Yes.
Kim Nettleton?
Yes.
Is there anybody's name that I did not call? All right, so the motion passes unanimously that Dr. Roberts will be our chair for this coming year. All right. Thank you. The next we'll move to vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? Everybody speaking?
I nominate Brenda Martin.
Okay.
I motion to.
I guess let me see if there's any other nominations. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All right, seeing no other nominations, then we will make a motion.
I make a motion to nominate Brenda for vice chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lindsay Burton seconded it. Lindsay Burton. All right, so we'll vote. All right, here we go. Katie Booth?
Yes.
Lindsay Burton?
Yes.
Brandy Corbett?
Yes.
Pauline Covington?
Here. Yes.
Hannah England?
Yes.
Jean Lee?
Yes.
I don't know if you vote for yourself or not. I'm gonna say John Maxey?
Yes.
Julia Roberts?
Yes.
Kim Nelson?
Yes.
Okay. And then we're not. All right. Good deal. So next is the illustrious role of secretary. Do we have any nominations for secretary? Such an important role.
I don't mind to do that.
Okay. So Lindsay Burton has nominated herself.
I'm gonna
Lindsay Burton. Uh-huh. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Seeing no other nominations, and is there a motion?
I make a motion that Lindsay Burton is the secretary.
I'll second that.
Okay, Hannah England seconded that. All right, so we'll vote for secretary. Katie Booth,
Yes.
Lindsay Burton.
Yes.
Brandy Corbett,
Yes.
Pauline Covington.
Yes.
Hannah England,
Yes.
Jean Lee,
Yes.
Bryn Martin,
Yes.
John Maxey,
Yes.
Julia Roberts.
Yes.
Kim Nettleton.
Yes.
All right, so that was a unanimous vote. Lindsay will be our secretary for this. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and all those other people who will be serving this year. All right, so next on the agenda. Let's see, I need to pass. Would you be able to pass those notes on to Lindsay? 'Cause I don't know if I can do that with continuing to do this. Yes. All right.
All the time.
Okay. It's, I can. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So now we'll have a review of priorities and a division of committees. And so I'm going to review the priority statement, and I'm going to assist Dr. Roberts in looking at committees, dividing those up. There will be one committee for each of the priorities. And I've divided the committees up kind of preemptively, but if there's a committee that you would rather serve on, we'll get to that in a little bit. So nothing is set in stone, that kind of thing. Here are our priorities. The first priority is equity, and I think there's also a copy of this in your folder today. See that? So the first priority is statement number 1, is around identification and services. And we're going to recommend that the Kentucky Department of Education, KDE, support districts in identification practices and services that are equitable for all students, including those who are twice exceptional, English learners, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations to remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. That's our first priority. The second priority is around clarity on accommodations for gifted and talented identification and testing. So priority statement number 2 reads, recommend that the KDE communicate and provide guidance and resources to school districts and families that assessment accommodations must be provided to students who have an individual education plan or 504 plan. And then the third priority was social emotional supports for GT students. And it reads that we will recommend that the KDE contacts districts to highlight the importance of social emotional learning needs of our gifted students and gather resources that various role groups such as school psychologists, counselors, teachers, and parents can use to address the needs of students. So I divided the groups up into 3 different committees. And Katie Booth and Pauline Covington had reached out to Joe and I and said they would like to work on priority 1. So I went ahead and put them on priority 1. If y'all would like to work on another committee, that is fine too. I also put Dr. Roberts, Brandy Corbin, Kim Nettleton, and Byron Darnell on priority number 1. And on priority 2, I've got Sean Dietrich Bradford, John Maxey, Jean Lee, and Hannah England. And then for priority number 3, I've got Bryn Martin, Kimberly Code, Tiffany Marshall, Jonathan Kirk, and Philip Cash. So does anybody want to switch to a different?
Would you prefer that we just stay on one committee?
Yes.
Okay.
I would prefer to be on priority 1, but I'll be wherever you would like for me.
Okay.
If you want to know a preference, that would be.
Okay. Okay. I was trying to divide them kind of equally. Is there anybody that would like to switch with Jean?
I don't think
Oh, that's
good.
Well, we can't let that happen.
so.
You can put me wherever anybody needs or wants me. I don't have
So,
a preference.
let's see. So what I'm going to do is, Jean, I can move you to priority number 1 and then put Lindsay on priority number 2. How's that? Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. So now what we're going to do is in our groups, what I've done is I've put up some chart paper around the room for us to divide up into our groups. And so what I'd like for you to do is to brainstorm about, how you'd like to implement these recommendations to the department. And as you brainstorm, be thinking about, your rationale, supporting data or your rationale for why this should be recommended to the department. And I've given you some data points there. State report card, there's a link to that. I can help you find that on your computer. And also the National Association for Gifted Children, or this is something that we can email to you if you decide to be the person that's got the computer, in your group. So there'll be, 3 roles in these groups. And so the facilitator is going to keep the group on task. And then the recorder is going to take the notes and place them in the Google Doc. It's in our Google folder. And then the reporter is going to share these ideas with our council members later on, either after lunch or I think it's after lunch today. So let me put those committees back up here for you to see. And then just remember that Jean Lee is going to be on priority number 1, and then Lindsay has been added to number 2, priority number 2. Are there any questions about what you'll be doing? All right, if not, I'm going to go get those the markers so that you can, brainstorm on your pads on the wall. And then if you need any assistance or have any questions, I'll be coming around the room and be glad to help anybody, assist anybody. Okay. Yes, so priority number 1 is over here. This is equity. Priority number 2 is over here. This is accommodation. And priority number 3, social emotional, is there at the back there. I tried to spread us out so that, we wouldn't bother each other as we had conversations. All right. So go ahead and go to your groups then, and we'll go ahead and be brainstorming. And I'll also work on that Google Doc, getting that to whoever the reporter is.
Okay.
However you want to do that.
So our first recommendation, I'll just read it because I feel like we tried to be concise. So KDE will support professional development of district and school leaders that highlights the appropriate identification of G&T students and the benefits of gifted and talented education toward closing excellence gaps and ensuring equitable learning opportunities across the state. We also spent considerable time kind of brainstorming best avenues for that information to go out. So we said learning should be endorsed, provided, and distributed through regional co-ops, CASA and KSBA, and then Commissioner Glass, we're hoping would give a little. And our rationale behind that was really that the more ears you have around the table, understanding how G&T can help impact school and district data, the better off we would be. Because sometimes coordinators might know, but school level principals, district administrators may not know. And then we also were pulling data from the KDE strategic dashboard. Call in, comment that, especially like your NAEP numbers, your AP and dual credit enrollment toward being more equitable. Those numbers would be impacted, and then the ACT, state, district, and school performance hopefully would increase. And those numbers, the gaps that are inherent in them right now, could provide some data that's necessary. We also thought the Infinite Campus Equity Dashboard, G&T data would be useful there, and state accountability data related to proficient and distinguished percentiles. That was our first one. Our second was that KDE will provide a diagnostic process as part of the needs assessment for CDIP, CSIP processes that includes gifted and talented students in MTSS plans. Mostly we had rationale for that, just that traditionally school and district plans focus on achievement gaps only, not also thinking about excellence gaps. And then our third was that KDE will continue to provide guidance to GT coordinators, school administrators, GT teachers, and school G&T selection committees regarding best practices to identify students for G&T education services that includes special considerations to address equitable access to G&T services. For this also, we mostly thought about rationale. Of course, districts have limited funding, so the more we can continue to push data about best practice tools and methods for GT identification, the better off we'll be.
Does anybody have any comments or questions they have had any of those things?
And remember, this priority is pretty much focused on equity in both identification and for services.
I do have a question because it says it looks like testing. I don't know if I'm trying to look and see. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
If there's anything on other ways of pulling gifted kids in besides testing. I don't know. I don't know if I missed that in what you were talking about.
You mentioned something about special considerations.
Special considerations, right? But as part of the identification process, I feel like that should be added, somehow that should be added in, that it's not just testing, that is used, that more than testing is used as part of that, and I don't know how. I just, and you may have said it and I just missed it, so I just wanted to clarify.
Are we looking at that third one?
It might be,
I kind of think that's what we were trying to get at there, was that because we're kind of limited in what we have traditionally used to identify gifted and talented students, and trying to open that up to additional ways to do that.
And of course, there are, like in the academic areas or GI, like the
Right.
regulation
Right.
kind of stands. So that's the idea of special considerations, I think. But of course, like, are you sort of thinking about the other non-academic areas or?
right, creative thought, leadership, performing arts. I mean, I just wonder if that terminology should also include, I don't know. It just seemed like maybe it was limiting.
So do you think maybe if it said after identify students, if it said all categories or all gifted categories, that might be helpful?
Yes.
I would like to see something too that reflects that parents have some input if the school doesn't recognize the test scores as being enough to identify them, that they can submit their evidence.
Well, I thought they were supposed to
And
have
how to
3
consider.
pieces of evidence.
They did.
Yeah,
And
but it doesn't have to all be test score, like a standardized test score. So.
a parent can recommend.
Right, and it might
Right.
be that there's a
But
better.
do they know that? So just something that says we want to make sure the schools are advising the parents that that is a possibility. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think I overspoke you. I was just gonna say that maybe it's a communication process that's better communicated about appeal. That if you feel like your child was missed in some way, because, in section 4, it talks about that the districts have to have an appeal process. And so that's usually included with the safeguards that are in section 10, grievance procedures, if you will. And so I think that maybe it's something that just needs to be communicated better about that. So do we need something like that phrase?
And further share information with parents about the appeal process, their role in providing input. So they know this is something that they can do.
Does it get too muddy, or like, is it focused enough to be one thing? if that's included.
Yeah, because where you said best practice to identify students in education services and all that.
What if in the list you just added families? Because then there would be more
Okay.
communication about
And that would
all
be
the.
best practice too.
Yeah.
I think that encompasses a lot of things right there, and that's something that I think the program really needs to think about is how to engage families.
Or is it regarding best practices for families or schools, for schools or families to identify students? Maybe just footnotes right there would capture it all, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think adding and families would be good. Yeah. Good idea.
So this is just only devil's advocate, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. Maybe Lindsay or our GT coordinator, so operationally, particularly at the elementary level. This can also work conversely. Because you have a lot of parents who.
Think their child is
That's
gifted.
correct. And, right, yeah, you know where I'm going with this.
They're not always maybe the best judge of their child.
And maybe so, maybe not. And so what happens, of course, is if they're, say, identified in primary talent pool, which is a broader entry. But then by that fourth grade, if you just seen it many times, if their child isn't, say, identified for the continuing services, then, then the pressure's on. And so I've just seen, from a district perspective, a recoil, because if you don't have a definitive line, then how do you defend your GT program, which also in turn, though, hurts too. It hurts on the other side. I'm just putting that on the table as an operational difficulty.
And Byron, what you're saying is definitely the case. That's why we have tried very carefully to only select for the talent pool and identify gifted kids, with the difference between select and identify, although I'm sure that is misunderstood and looked at. I would have to say that the primary talent pool is such an important part of getting kids from lower income families with opportunities to develop their intelligence, their potential.
I think it goes back to communication too, that if you're communicating with families, that primary talent pool is a temporary category, and that it expires at the end of the third grade. And if that's upfront, and they know that upfront.
Yeah.
So again, I think communication to families is just the key.
And I think it also helps to have a backup, like last year, we sat down as a committee across the district to look at all the people that had been, put in I put in students from my class that I thought might be good candidates and different people have nominated, and we went through those like as a group. So then you're not just saying, well, she said he's not gifted, but I know he is. And you're like, no, actually, we sat down as a committee and we went through all these applications and we vetted them and we, like you have a little bit of.
Perhaps, I'm just sort of thinking about the things that are being brought out, and I wonder if, so the beginning talks about providing guidance. So Katie, guidance about best practices for identification. It feels like that is like sort of a technical, I don't know that families fits into this objective, like communication to families. I don't know that it fits into this objective because it's about guidance for best practice identification, which is, I don't know.
Maybe you could say something like to the effect of how KDE providing guidance can help in, or guidance about GT identification through evidence up through test scores or special parent anecdotal evidence, can inform,
What are you saying? This is more like what about what the school does? They're trying to say like.
Yeah,
Maybe
this
we
is
can
like a
just,
technical
like,
thing and it'll be like, hey, you make
Well,
sure.
or, like, schools are responsible for notifying parents, the procedures they follow
Yeah.
to identify gifted and
yeah,
like,
that's it.
so that covers the
They
family.
still
Parents are
doesn't-
being notified.
And
but-
because every district will have a different set of,
Yeah.
And then end of the year reports, part of the surveys that you have to do are the parent surveys to get the input, so that could.
so maybe there need to be two different,
But somewhere that needs to be part, because that is part of the
Mhm.
identifying process, but a lot of parents that don't realize they have a role in that, they
Yeah.
think they have to accept whatever.
whatever comes to
Um,
like.
And if your only word is appeal in the midst of, 2 pages, they still might not realize, oh, I can give input, I can.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they just see their child is not, they were like, well, I don't want to argue about it, I don't want to, they just don't think my child is gifted, oh, that's cool, you know what I mean? They might
Yeah,
not-
maybe just something saying, like families should be notified of the school's process and be made aware of their rights within the process, like what they're able to do.
Potential
It's probably a better way to put that.
contribution. I think.
Contribution, there you go.
Okay.
Contribution.
Could I ask one quick question if we got time for a little follow-up? You said you all have a committee, because I was going to suggest that too, but
I'm sorry?
who all is on your committee?
Last year, when they, our Youth to Talented program was kind of fledgling, and Emily Laughlin, actually, who was on the committee but moved, was our coordinator for the county, and we just had, when we were doing primary talent pool and some of the older ones, it was just like an elementary representative, somebody from middle school, somebody from the arts, somebody from drama. Like, we just had a committee that sat down and went through all the, I think there was actually.
There shouldn't be parents on
There should
that.
be a parent on
No,
that?
not on that. I think it's in the KDE
Yeah.
regulation who's included and there's like.
I was gonna say, I can't remember, there were several of us.
It's definition 17 in section 1, it lists
Yeah.
out who,
There was-
those
yeah, there
members should be.
Okay.
Parents aren't listed there.
Gotcha.
I know
But
in
that,
the
that's
district,
very sensitive information.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Oh,
Yeah, regulation, there's a lot of sensitive information that's
Okay.
covered and so you have to be
we
very
include the
careful.
counselor in
Yes,
our
we had a
committee at
counselor,
each
yeah.
school. And so that's really good input because the counselor seems to know the whole child, the background of the child, and can give input of like the socioeconomic level of the student, whether what's going on in the household to kind of provide, is that student living up to his or her, level. So that helps with that puzzle piece of it.
Okay, so that's a different, what is that committee called? That's
Called
called.
the gifted and talented identification and selection.
There you go.
Okay,
Go
I
find
see
it.
that.
Couldn't pull the total title out right now, but.
For our school, I think it was called the advisory
That's a
committee,
parent.
so parents could be on that.
Okay,
Okay.
you could have different, yeah, you
Okay,
could
that's
have an
different.
advisory committee. but
Okay,
that
so
would
we
be
could give
different.
advice, but like you
Yeah,
said.
this was
we
just like a
need to deal with
selection. They were going for those that, yeah.
Gotcha, that's different, gotcha.
Okay, I removed families on here, but I don't know that I really have leave to do that. I'm not sure where that goes. Like, do we want to include and families? But then I was also thinking, what about, we said we wanted to include identifying students in all GT areas, and I added using multiple measures, which maybe gets to more of the heart of what we're trying to convey, which is that you're not just giving the Iowa once and then your GT or not.
Mhm.
Does that, because best practices, I would think, includes family information and communication. And then if we make sure that we reiterate that it's multiple measures, not just tests, does that,
Maybe multiple measures, including what you just said, family communication. As a program or as something to indicate that the school still has the final say. But it's input as the school makes its decision, something like that. So it's not like, I'm not gonna get my hopes up to think if I say this, that means they automatically we don't wanna mislead them either. But it can be considered as the school makes its final deliberation. Deliberation sounds so.
So would that be under the rationale But then maybe you put that there and say, this is part of that, but it wouldn't be the exact recommendation, but that would be part of the rationale that parents are included in, in their information is accepted and maybe even asked for. Because maybe they haven't been in the past and that communication is important. Maybe that's part of that rationale of why that's needed. And that's just a question. I'm not on that committee, so I don't know. You all have been talking about it all morning.
You're right.
I think I
And I think the
I think
more
it does say
direct the
something.
recommendations are, the more likely they are
Yeah.
going to be.
Policies and procedures and they generate. So,
Seems to me we're ready to hear from priority two.
Sure. We are the priority for, yeah, I've got 3 different screens, so I'm note taking. For identification and testing, and our focus is much more narrow than your all. So it just kind of shows one little thing that had come up just in Hannah's work that she noticed was an issue about twice exceptional students receiving their accommodations, gifted testing that they are legally required to have for their IEP. So we just said the committee recommends that a statement be added to the Gifted and Talented Handbook under Section 3 to address and clarify that students who receive special education services and have accommodations in their IEP be given those accommodations during testing for identification for gifted services. The addition of this statement would also draw attention to the fact that twice exceptional students are often overlooked for receiving GT services. Then we have just a variety of statutes and things where students, if they have an IEP and that IEP has testing accommodations, they're required to receive those. Some articles about twice exceptional students, how often they are overlooked for gifted services. And we found it interesting, thanks to the guidance of Kathy, statistics from the Kentucky School Report Card that show there's slightly less than 3% of all students in the state of Kentucky who are identified as gifted and talented students are also identified as having a disability. So there's 86,946 students in our state that are identified as gifted and talented, and only a little over 3,000 also have a disability. So that seems like a rather low number for that many kids.
And we didn't have an opportunity because it was kind of like towards the end of it, we were curious to see of those with disability, how many would be maybe like a GI or a specific academic versus creativity or the arts, to kind of see, because I think a lot of times you'll hear twice exceptional and you will hear, oh, they're really gifted in art or one of the arts, which is wonderful, but they can also be gifted in a specific academic. And so we didn't get the data on that, but we were intrigued to think, what would that be? Of that percentage, how many would be GI or?
I looked that up for a twice exceptional presentation that I gave just recently. And so the majority is general intellectual ability, and then it's language arts, and then it's math, and then it's visual arts.
Oh, really?
Which is interesting.
Yeah, I would have thought the visual art would have been more so.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to do a root cause analysis on that, but I know many districts have started to screen all of their students using a GI tool of some kind, and I wonder if that's why that number maybe is larger. Whereas when we look at the visual and performing arts, when I monitor people, talk to them, their process is usually referral from teachers or parents in the district. We don't have as, maybe it's something we should talk about at some point, is screening tools, or there's not a lot of districts who screen in the non-academic areas. We don't have a tool for that, or it doesn't seem like we have.
That's kind of what I was thinking with our recommendation regarding, like in the first priority, was the idea that the only tools we have for determining gifted and talented are majority geared towards intellectual ability. We don't have anything concrete, so it's left up to schools to make, which is good in some cases, to make decisions about what their criteria are going to be. But, what is gifted and talented? I'm not a performing arts school, so what is gifted and talented in performing arts at my school may look very different than what is gifted and talented at a full performing arts school. And so they get marked gifted and talented, but if they go to, you know, your school in Lexington that's a performing arts school, then that may not, you know, hold up.
I think that goes to services,
Yeah,
so.
this was just a random note because it's a personal interest to me. I'm a foster parent, and in scrolling through that, we only had 254 identified gifted and talented foster children in our state. Seems like a staggeringly low number to me when we have 10,000 foster kids. That's just my own little soapbox. I was like, oh my goodness. I would just be curious to see how that shakes out too.
So that would really have serious implications for the meeting social and emotional needs.
Yeah, that was my
It's more
thought,
about
like how many of those kids have that
It's more
or
about
have
transparency.
behavioral issues that keep them from those things. Or,
Opportunity to
yeah.
demonstrate their gifts and talent.
And it's interesting that you brought that up because I have not found the best system yet. If you all have, please let us know. But with kids moving in and out of district, unless I run a report every week or unless someone at the school said, hey, you have a new GT student, that student can go under the radar for a while until we're like, we run a report and we're like, oh, who's this kid? Then you go check them out because a lot of times their GT documentation will not come in their cumulative folder, or they won't be flagged. I mean, it's just that loss of communication. And thankfully, hopefully we'll end up finding them, or if Miss Kathy sends out a report and says, you know, you got these students, but it's almost like it's not as quick as I would like for it to be. Yes, yeah.
So just one comment about that might be helpful, and we'll move on to the next priority. I've heard some districts say that one of the things that they do, Hannah, is they have a enrollment form. And on that enrollment form, the question is, was your child previously in the gifted and talented program? And they found that to be an effective way of ensuring that they don't miss students until they run the report or other types of things help them. But that might be helpful to have on your enrollment form, that'd be one of the questions.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
I was thinking more often in the case of like foster children. Well, I know in my own school, the children who are in foster care a lot have been to multiple households and they've been in multiple schools. So they maybe have missed whatever the testing area time is, or they missed the opportunity to go through the identification process because they are transient in terms of households and the schools they attend.
And granted too, there's a lot of things like, I myself not personally experienced it, that there's a lot of struggles that they face.
Right.
Things like being like, oh, they have a musical strength, maybe we should
Right.
go to.
Right.
Probably are not at the forefront, but it was just, I don't know, it just stood out to me. That seems like a really low number.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. We talked about homeless children in our group. We talked about, but no one mentioned foster children. So-
Who are a group of children who
Right.
certainly need every possible opportunity.
I mean, of course, we advocate for the things that are close to our heart. How about priority 3?
Do you want me to share out or does somebody else want to?
Okay, why don't you do the recommendation, I'll do the
Okay.
rest.
So our recommendation, our first one is that gifted students, we have social and emotional needs, and we realized we didn't have a lot of data. We had a lot of stories, we had a lot of experiences, but we didn't have a lot of backup data. So we said gifted students should be included as a subgroup identifier for disaggregation and identification in all areas. This should be incorporated in all reports as an exceptionality, and in statewide reports include GT as subcategories in areas. And Kentucky Stat should develop a GT profile to gather display consolidated data on GT students so that you don't have to look down. So then you can pull that out. So that was our first recommendation, is help us get data to make some recommendations. Do you want to say any more?
Okay, and our rationale was that, to check the KDE strategic dashboard, especially NAEP, AP, and dual credit enrollment equity, and ACT, state, district, and school performance.
Yeah, the different rationale. I
Is
think
that-
y'all are you just go down a little bit further, Brad.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. It's up here on the.
That's listed on ours?
Yeah,
Okay.
understanding.
We were still typing, as you could see, as we,
Oh.
so we've
I
got
think
have
we're up to
put
number one.
on the here, so.
Like, that doesn't sound familiar to me. Okay. All right. Understanding characteristics of gifted students is highly important, not only for their fulfillment, but for their specific contributions to society. Gifted students experience more stress than their non-gifted counterpart and their peers, but they mostly prefer to react to the stressor in a cognitive way. And that's our research is Ziegler. Okay. Ziegler and Glick. The second evidence, gifted students are disaggregated under safety, dual credit, and AP coursework. And the third point, collect data to determine areas of need. And might want to pick up on there. Sorry. Professional. You
That's
see it on
the
yours?
one there.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion? Can I go on? Okay. Okay, so, our other recommendation is that KDE will require professional development by administrators, teachers, and school counselors on the social and emotional needs of gifted students. And one thing we said was that professional development is on the district gifted plans, but is not implemented systemically. And lesson plans may be one way to check implementation during an audit to see if it's being implemented. But we felt like there was an overwhelming need for everybody to receive some training in this, and that had not been, didn't look like it'd be done. And again, we're relying on what we hear rather than here's the actual data. So which is why our big need for data is there. And then this is kind of also with that, KDE will require that social and emotional needs of gifted students should be part of the preparation program for pre-service teachers, counselors, and administrators. They need to be aware of stressors, triggers, behaviors, and unique needs of gifted students. That just needs to be part of that understanding of what gifted is, just like special other exceptionalities need to be understood by people. And it's part of their training. And then I just typed in underneath the, like, we don't have a recommendation for it, but I did type in social and emotional needs of foster children, and under radar children. And I just put in GT documentation on arriving quickly. That's just something that we don't have a recommendation for yet, but that's there, so that we don't forget that. Is there anything else? We had like pages of stuff over there that we talked about.
Oh, no.
We're trying to distill it down. Was there anything else for my team?
No, I think those are the main things. You know, I think the difficulty at the school level is, you know, I just said we're really good at adding, but we're not really good at subtracting. And, you know, in our current situation, I think that is a massive contributor to kind of where we are in the current position. So it's tough. It's a tight line to walk regarding all of the things, but it's no less important. And I would venture to say sometimes, like probably a lot of other things, skimmed over and or sort of glossed over, and then we move on.
I just want to add one clarification with Ziegler and Glick. They didn't find that there was any evidence that the gifted students actually had emotional problems because they do have in their arsenal a lot of, intelligent ways of dealing with their problems, and that's the way they handle it best. So because of that, they're able to I guess, be resilient. But yet they do endure a lot of stress.
So you're saying initially that's a myth that these gifted students can deal with their own emotional problems. not a truth.
No, actually, that it sounds like so, but we do need to be aware of the damage that it could cause, especially if we're not paying attention to the burnout, the stress that they do endure. Uh, I don't think all students do that, but I haven't, those experts are saying that there's no emotional problems, even though, yes, they endure more stress. But there's not necessarily, and I was surprised because I thought, surely there's some emotional problems that come from that stress, but they're saying they can handle it better. But you're thinking that's a myth?
I'd say that's a myth.
I want to research that more. Because that was surprised me too, because I was just about to type that in and I thought, oh, that's totally opposite. But then I thought I should tell the group in case if you think we should put that in.
I think the data tell us that gifted students probably don't have any more emotional problems than other children. But that doesn't mean that they're dealing with them.
We did a survey with our middle school gifted students last year on social emotional issues. And the vast majority said that they experience stress over fear of failure. And that if they make a B, they feel like they're a failure. And so I think their stress may be different than some other children, that they definitely have stress. And I think strategies like you mentioned of how to deal with, that's what we met with them later, and our counselors came in and worked with those students and provided strategies for how to deal and work through those types of stressors. And I think if we could see more of that with our gifted students, that we would be moving in the right
We
direction.
also, we mentioned when we were talking, we also mentioned the fact that unintentionally teachers help develop that in students. Not because they intentionally, but because those are the students they always call on when they want the right answer. Those are the students they call on to teach the other students. Those are the teachers they set up to be examples of how to be perfect. And so the students don't know how to handle any kind of what they perceive as failure. So that's why we felt like it needed to be not just the gifted coordinators or gifted teachers, but it needed to be administrators needed to understand, teachers needed to understand, counselors needed to understand what they were seeing. So, yeah. Thank
I
you.
think they would make a really good research project. I think there's multiple layers of things going on there. I think there's the child themselves, then there's the whole nature, and nurture part. I think there's a lot of things going on there. I think that would make a really interesting research.
I will,
Okay, go
sorry.
ahead, Ray.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I would caution this committee from making any more, well, I don't know, I would caution putting more requirements of professional development on the plate of a teacher. As someone who is consistently trying to lessen the number of required professional development that teachers have to complete at the beginning of the school year so that we can get to the business of planning for teaching. I think we have to be really careful about making a recommendation that there is a required extra training. We have the emotional need. I think what we've talked about so far, the emotional needs of our gifted students are different maybe from the emotional needs of students who are not identified as gifted, but I don't know that requires a special training of any kind, more that they be included in as a subcategory in current training rather than, this kind of stigma or this kind of stereotype that the only people who have emotional issues or social and emotional issues are poor children of color, and that it's all behavior related. Maybe we need to be more intentional about saying that our gifted and talented students may not present these same outside characteristics, but they still have emotional needs that are unique to their circumstances. Rather than adding additional training to the plates of teachers. I just don't think that is a productive, or maybe not productive isn't the right word, but it's not a good thing. Yeah, maybe for our committee to recommend.
Well, now, I was just gonna add that at the beginning of the year, the middle school, well, really now I think it's extended to elementary, middle and high has to do suicide training.
Yeah.
And a gifted child is an example that is in the video
Yes.
that you watch. You watch her characteristics, her stresses, and you watch the counselor, how to deal with it. So I think that encompasses
Yeah.
some of that, but that's what I was gonna add, that they do include specifically a gifted child in her extremities.
Right.
I'd like to add from the superintendent's standpoint, adding professional development or requirement for professional development also adds additional burden from an administrative standpoint and financial standpoint.
Yes.
Just a few years ago, in our district, we had to actually pay teachers an additional day just so they could get in the required trainings that they've
Exactly.
done. So for a district to require additional PD would be quite a financial burden too. Because like you said, just to get your required trainings in, teachers now are coming to us saying, if you're requiring us to come one more day, you're going to have to pay us another day. You know, and I think it's justified sometimes. So, you know, that's, so
Well, but
anyway,
that's
that would be a concern from the superintendent.
And you're
standpoint.
paying them at their hour daily rate, you're not paying them for a PD, like, I mean, it's a big budgetary concern.
Well, perhaps what can be, I think what we, in the priority statement number 1, talked about is the promotion and the endorsement of gifted and talented as a serious need for attention in our districts. And to have Commissioner Glass endorse it and promote it in his speeches, for example, or his welcome statements can be effective. It doesn't mean that, you know, we want all teachers to be, to make all the teachers go through all this training. Maybe it is just a checkbox of, have you considered that this child could be identified as gifted and talented? And if that might be the case, if the box is checked, perhaps we could refer that child to a gifted and talented coordinator. I almost feel as though we just need to keep from allowing these children to fall through the cracks. If there are things that are outliers for that child, whether that child is an English language learner or a transient student, you know, that could be of consideration, just like the enrollment form. It's a checkbox, you know, maybe it's as simple as that. I don't know.
I think you've highlighted Byron and John and Randy, you've highlighted the importance of making sure that recommendations fit within the fabric of the school and where we can do this and not add on to anything that's good. On the other hand, I'm hearing from all of the groups that there is information that absolutely must be disseminated, because if principals don't know really what you do or why you do it, or superintendents don't know it, you don't get the support for doing it. So it's a very important discussion that we've had. Recommendations are well thought out, and will the recommendations move where at this point?
That's a good question. So I'll need to probably.
Maybe that's a further consideration.
Yeah, might be something that we get back to you on.
And I will say that, you know, for instance, recommending that everybody get something doesn't mean that they get it every year. And it doesn't mean, I mean, in the venue that it comes in, isn't mandated, but in some way, it should be documented that this is happening. You know, whether you have incorporated it or, you know, if it's on a district's plan, that is part of their gifted program, then why is it not happening? You know, that is their plan. So it's not necessarily we're not knowing that this, whatever document we turn in is gonna go through like 7,000 committees before it ever sees the light of day. I mean, realistically, I do think it's important to say that somebody needs to know about this. And if we are hiring GT coordinators who don't have any training in gifted education, well then how is referring a child or a problem to them going to help understand what's going on with that gifted student? So I don't know that if we want to say, every 4 years, every 5 years. I mean, I don't know if that's a recommendation kind of change that we would want to make, but I think there's a Texas that requires their teachers every year to do some sort of online training in gifted education, I think.
That's true, but they
Yeah.
also don't
Probably
have
not
an
very good.
they don't have an
Right.
endorsement to become
Right.
gymnasts.
Yeah. So,
I'd like, you're done. I just wanted to add a point. I definitely commiserate with the workload that many teachers have. And I understand what you're saying. I really, really do. And my comment is not to you, it's to the fact that we do, unfortunately, we're faced against having to make those kinds of choices when we should be able to choose what's best for all of our students. And there should be money there. And if not, we should request a kind of audit to see what kinds of things are not working that we can trim from and take money to make sure we're addressing the needs of all of our students. It's not acceptable that teachers don't know how to deal with gifted students. And it's not acceptable that our gifted and training coordinators, if they're not receiving enough training, who's dealing with our students. This is a big part of our population. And we say we're here to educate all the child. We leave no child behind. And, and we can't quibble over what we have to do is to be smart about how we do it so that it's not just adding more on the teacher, but maybe finding a better use of the time so that, and plus now we have webinars, we have things that can be done that doesn't take as much of their time. But when the commissioner has some of those big meetings, those might be some good times to have some pull-out workshop for some of these things. We have all of these meetings, but it seems like maybe if we could consolidate some of those meetings, make them run more efficiently. And there's lots of experts to help to show us how, even though we might think we're doing it so well. And then we can put in a wonderful, training for our gifted students and for our, gifted teachers and for our counselors and have something. But to me, it's just not acceptable, especially for us to be the specializing advisory group, to accept that we're going to just leave out the gifted students in the training for our teachers to deal with. I know it's difficult and I know they have a lot to do, but that is part of their job, is to be able to educate all of the students. So the thing is, where our compassion needs to come is in how we can help to make sure that they're equipped to be able to do that without all of it coming from them. We got to make sure that like you said, the superintendents and the principals have that buy-in so that they could take some of that load. Maybe some of them could take a few cuts. And I know a lot of people might not be interested in taking a cut and pay, but the students shouldn't have to take the cut. The teachers shouldn't have to take the cut and not be qualified to deal with a big body of their students. So we really need to look at that thing a bit more, because I hear what you're saying. We ask a lot of our teachers, and they need to get paid more to do with all the stuff that they're dealing with. They need more resources and support. But the answer is not to just accept that and leave our students unattended.
We have lots of ideas. This session has been very important. I think the recommendations will be a start, and then we need to develop a plan on how we'll take those and go forward. I think the next thing on our agenda is to look at the minutes that have been passed around. We might plan through that. Perhaps you have read them carefully before. Anyone want to make the motion that the minutes be accepted?
Like the motion that we accept the minutes from the July 13th meeting.
Thank you. A second.
I'll second.
Any comments or suggestions for the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye, and those opposed say nay. Minutes passed as they are. Kim, I think you are to have a report from the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education.
Is it time?
It is time.
Okay. So, we have a new, executive leader, or executive director, who, was hired this summer. You probably all heard, Allison Bedford, right? So make sure I've got the name right. She has started and she is very excited about being the executive director of Cage.
What was her name?
Allison Metford, Metford. And so, we have a conference coming up on October 19th at, Western Kentucky University Town. And to make it sure, because I was thinking it was in Bowling Green.
It's a WKU campus at Elizabethtown.
Yeah, thank you.
Trying to make the distance more centralized for folks.
And then we also have conference coming up in end of February, and that is on the 27th and 28th of February, and that will be at the Hilton in Lexington. So those are our conferences coming up, and so those are just the general announcements. I did contact Allison and the president, Toddy, and one of the questions that came up was just to ask the council, what is the council doing towards supporting students that are gifted in visual and performing arts? And is there a way that Cage could work with the council on that? If there was she wanted to know if there was some initiative, or if there was some plan, or if there was some thought to providing that support. I'm throwing that out there.
We'll think about it.
Yeah. And then the other one is, how could Cage partner with the advisory council to maybe, and this is just a question, to maybe provide more services to students who are gifted, or to maybe get a grant, or to work on gifted education. And if there were those opportunities, she would like to help Cage partner with it. So that's not a big report, but that is kind of the questions that are burning at the Cage right now.
The only other Cage date, February the 1st, will be the proclamation signing at the Capitol Rotunda. So put that on your calendar. That's a wonderful place to be. If you can bring children, that's great too.
That's our next, not our next, after November. That'll be our meeting in February 1st. We're having a meeting right around that.
Actually, I don't have the calendar for the next meetings, but I bet someone else has it at the tip of their fingers.
I have a hybrid meeting on Wednesday, the 1st.
The 1st of
February.
And that's virtual.
Hybrid.
I don't know about you, but I think hybrid's hard. Just think of the talking we've done today and how challenging that would be if some people were online and some people were here. But keep that on your calendar. I'd like to share a little bit of information about something that we started at the Center for Gifted Study. And maybe I should say we've revived that Duke Tip did. But the talent search, of course, that Kentucky was involved in shut down when Duke Tip did in the fall of 20. That's been quite a while ago now. And almost immediately, we at the Center for Gifted Studies started collaborating with the University of Iowa because they have done a statewide talent search for many years. And then we brought in people at other centers across the southeast to talk about it. And we moved out ahead of all of them. I think others will follow. But TIP Kentucky is officially launched, and we have a talent search for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And of course, the talent search, which was started by Julian Stanley 50 years ago, looks at above level assessment, trying to see that the kids who do really well on an 8th grade test are all pretty much bumping their heads against the ceiling of learning. And until you have a test that lets them demonstrate where is it they perform, you really don't know much about planning the appropriate learning opportunities for them. So for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, iExcel is what we're using. It is using Explore items, and they were planned for 8th graders, so it does provide a ceiling. And you actually can read a little bit about it in the Art Challenge magazine. Just last month, the ACT has opened up for 13-year-olds and younger. And they're, of course, 7th and 8th graders who are taking that above level assessment to see where they actually would perform. And I want you all just to know it's there, it's available, and it is a statewide talent search. We will open it up to others from other states if they don't have a talent search in place there. So do you have questions for me on that?
So once the students are identified, what then will happen?
Well, a talent search really has 3 components. The first is the above level assessment. The second is programming, and that can happen within the schools, or it can happen as it did with Duke and with the rest of us who've been doing summer programming, Saturday programming, challenging kids and what they're learning. And the third part is recognition. And we held the Duke tip ceremony at WKU for 40 years. In fact, if you had been asking me what might close down, I would never have put Duke tip on the list at all. But I was not clairvoyant, nor am I today. And so we will have recognition for those who score at high level. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. And Dr. Roberts, thank you for offering this and spearheading these initiatives, because I know just firsthand as a parent, my child has greatly benefited from the work at WKU through the Discover program.
And then let me tie to the fact we have a Javits Grant. And the Javits funding is the only federal funding that is specifically for gifted kids. Isn't that crazy? And we're partnering with Johns Hopkins on this particular grant. And I want you to know about it because it has to do with a whole lot of the things we talked about today. It is called Project Launch Plus. It is looking for 6th graders who have had fewer opportunities than many of their peers because of family income or by geographic location. And any 6th grader who is within 3 hours of Bowling Green would be eligible to participate in Project Discover. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone specifically about that, but it involves above level testing. It involves, it is a research grant. And because it is a research grant, it has a design, and that all of the students who take the above level testing as part of Project Launch Plus half of them will be randomly selected for summer programming. And then all of them who come to summer programming do that again the next summer. And the goal is to provide the opportunities that will let them know about other opportunities, because opportunity begets opportunity. That's kind of how it works in this world. So I just want you to know of this. I'm fairly well known for saying an opportunity is not a real opportunity until you know about it. So help other people know about these opportunities.
And I guess those summer opportunities would be free.
Through the grant, that is true. In fact, everything through the grant is at no cost to students.
I just recently had a student back at home that went through the camp and just spoke to her this week. She said she loved it. She's excited to get to go back next year. So it's making a difference. We appreciate it.
And you know, one of those things that's so important is who else they meet.
That's right.
And they encourage each other then based on, oh gosh, you do this. I could do that too.
That was one of the main takeaways of my daughter. She said, basically, you just get to learn about each other and get to meet new people. And I said, you're right. And it worked, and it continues.
So Kathy, are there other things that's on the agenda that I have overlooked?
So I guess just a few closing housekeeping items. If you have travel that you'd like to be reimbursed for, I sent you a travel voucher form. Laura has also sent you some information about how to complete those forms as well. And there's also an exit slip, and I emailed an exit slip to you today as well. So if you could complete that exit slip when you get a chance, that really helps inform us, how we can improve our meetings and better serve students through these meetings. So I think that's all I've got. Does anybody else have anything else?
It won't let me click on the link, or it won't open the exit slip link for me. I don't know.
I've had the same issue.
Glitch, but it just says it's like
Can't be reached.
Okay, I'll take a look at that and resend it. Maybe I don't have access to the permission slip. That's something that Joe created.
Oh, okay.
So, or maybe I did something incorrect when I copied and pasted the link. So I'll make a note to look into that and try to fix it.
And before we go, I would like to make two more announcements. For several years, our center has offered Victoria Fellows as an opportunity for superintendents in the state. We'll be sending out that invitation early next week, and it's a couple of times or 3 times the superintendents come together. We learn a lot together, and obviously we talk about a lot of the things that we've talked about here today. We also will be doing cohorts for elementary principals and middle school principals. So we'll send that information out. Anyone can say yes, and all their expenses are paid when they come to do that. I so feel that if your principal knows what's going on, if your superintendent knows what's going on, kids win. So you might nudge your superintendent and your principals to say yes and be part of that.
You mentioned high school. Was that intentional? Okay, so it's just the elementary and middle school. Assistant principals?
Sorry.
Assistant principals too?
No, it's for principals and superintendent. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn this meeting.
A second?
I second.
No discussion needed. All those in favor say aye. Safe trip home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk about these issues with folks who make a difference. Because it matters for kids.